Okay, section 7.2. And we'll start to get to what chapter 7 is about in a few minutes. But first we need some kind of stuff. Okay, here's a bell curve. And it's shaded in. And I want to know what are like the z-scores, the standard deviations that go down here on the x-axis to go with it. Okay, and we had that invNorm thing, and there wasn't really like homework on that. But I knew that we would need it because we would come into this section and then we'd use it. And invNorm, you put in a percent and it gives you some sort of z-score. But, well, okay, I could put in 95%. There was a kind of bit at the time, and maybe I was in the wrong half. If I just put invNorm 0.95 in here, it's assuming that my 95% is all to the left. All right, it was really hard if it turned out to be to the right, because then you needed to do something with changing the sign on the z-scores and stuff like that. But this isn't even that. This is not pointing to the left or the right. It's pointing to some chunk in the middle. Okay, so I can't invNorm 0.95 because it won't give me the right answer at all. It'll assume it's all left shifted, and this is like center shifted. And it's because it's exactly in the center. I've just told you it is in fact the center. If it was something random like this, 62% right here, okay, then how am I going to explain that to anyone? Well, I kind of want some z-scores, and one of them should maybe be a little bit to the left of the mean, and the other one's almost to the end, but not. How am I going to explain that to a calculator, just sort of some random amount? I can't do that. There's no explanation for that. So the only kind of question where it's pointing to some chunk in the middle like that, that you go, oh, okay, I get it, I want to like do that, is if it's exactly in the center. And I still can't just invNorm 0.95 because it'll just assume it's all left shifted and it won't be the same shape. So what we're going to do here, I kind of touched on this in that other video, but what we're going to do is look at the blue stuff. The blue stuff I'm going to call the leftovers. Okay, the black stuff that was the problem, that's shaded in. And the blue stuff is the leftover. It is the part that wasn't shaded in. So that's why I'm calling it the leftovers. Okay, and because this is completely symmetric, the blue stuff all total is 5%. So half of the blue stuff is 2.5%. Okay, and that's why I couldn't do that with the 62 is because I can't do half the leftovers. All right, so this is half the leftovers, that's half the leftovers. If it's not even symmetric and one chunk is bigger than the other, what am I supposed to divide by to get like the two sides? I can't do it. So the only time they're going to give you a problem where you're talking about the center that way is if it's exactly symmetric. All right, so this I'm going to call half the leftovers. And there's a bunch of times where I'm going to say that, well, this is a half the leftovers situation because it's shorthand for all this we've just been through. If 95% is the problem, the leftovers is 5% because altogether it's got to be 100%. And half of the leftovers is 2.5%. So whenever you hear me say, oh, it's a half the leftovers situation, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, and so this problem is an invNorm half the leftovers. 0.025. All right, if I have to invNorm half the leftovers, I have to remember what they did with the invNorm. Okay, so it's under distribution. It's the normal CDF and invNorm are very strange because they're under second function and distribution and third one down, invNorm. Okay, invNorm 0.025. All right, negative 1.599. Why don't I call that negative 1.96? Negative 1.96. That is the z-score that goes with this line right there. Well, what's the z-score that goes with that one? Do I need to do some other kind of problem? well, that's the beauty of it being symmetric. If I invNorm that, plus and minus are my answers. Positive 1.96 goes right there. Okay, and that's why it works out so great, is if I invNorm half the leftovers, I know both answers. And this, okay, if you're in the 95% in the middle, you are usual. But then we also said, hey, if you're within 2 standard deviations of the mean, you're usual. Now, this is why those two things are floating around at the same time, is because it's actually the same thing. Someone who has a z-score of negative 1.96, they're right on that 2 standard deviation cutoff, all the way up to a positive 1.96. They're on that 2 standard deviation cutoff. We got to round a little bit, but it's basically from negative 2 to positive 2 is usual. Or being in the 95% is usual. They both mean usual, and they both mean exactly the same thing. Between negative 2 and positive 2, or being in that 95% in the middle is exactly the same thing. So that's why we've been floating around 2 definitions all this time. All right, now how do I do my homework? Okay, so I see something like this. Z, that's an alpha. It kind of, I think I make it gets typed out as an A a lot because it's easier to type an A. Alpha over 2. Okay, the over 2 tells you it's a half the leftovers situation. That's what they're trying to say here. This is trying to say invNorm half the leftovers. Okay, and then they give you some number like that, 98%. You don't need to draw a picture. I just need to invNorm half the leftovers on that. So invNorm, okay, so 98%. All right, well, that is the big number. The leftovers would be 2%. And half the leftovers would be 1%. All right, so then I just second distribution, invNorm, 0.01. Okay, I've just invNormed half the leftovers, and it gives me negative 2.3, I'll round up, negative 2.33. But then someone goes, wait, no, there's supposed to be 2 z-scores with this. That's okay. Plus and minus. All right, now I got 2 z-scores. That's all you have to do to have the other z-score, so I'm not going to bother trying to figure out how to put anything else in my calculator. I'm just going to like plus and minus once I get the negative version. Or some of the homework problems look like this one, okay, where it says A, or alpha, is 0.04. Basically, instead of giving you like 96% on this, someone went ahead and already did the leftovers part of the calculation, but they still want the half the leftovers part of the calculation. So they gave me the leftovers is 0.04. Half the leftovers, I can see it's half the leftovers because it says divided by 2, is invNorm 0.02. All right. invNorm 0.02. And it says negative 2.053. Okay, so, and I know it's supposed to be plus and minus, so I'll write that down. 2.0